I'm still a little bit sick. Don't worry about it. Hello and welcome to RPG Fortress. My name is Richard. Thank you for tuning in. Remember our good friend Aaron? Remember when he gifted me Shining Resonance Refrain to review? Remember how much I hated that game? Well, he had such a good time watching the first video that he's gifted me another game to review. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks a lot. Valkyrie Profile. Holy cow, you guys, this is like my third favorite game of all time, right behind Shining Force 2 and Phantasy Star 4. I got the game shortly after it released on the original PlayStation about 8,000 years ago when I was a tiny post-embryonic beard. I played the shit out of this game. It was back in the era when I had so much free time, I could play through games multiple times, getting all the endings, getting all my units to level 99, and completing the optional and very hard dungeon. But now I have a job and bills and a bad back and a distinct lack of time to do fun things. Please kill me. The Valkyrie Profile series, despite being around since 1999, has only had a small handful of releases. Valkyrie Profile on PS1, Valkyrie Profile on PS2, Covenant of the Plume on DS, and some gacha game on mobile that we don't talk about. I cherish those first three games, with the original being one of my absolute favorites. But in late 2022, Valkyrie Elysium was released for PS4, PS5, and Windows. I was elated and I was skeptical all at once to suddenly bring back a niche title from 20 years ago, and it wasn't going to be an RPG. It was supposedly a Devil May Cry style action game with some light RPG elements. And it wasn't Tri-Ace who was developing it, it was some company called Soleil, but it was Square Enix. Surely it was going to be good, right? Just look at some of the other games they've released around the same time. Oh. So pick up your Angel Slayer, grab your Tome of Firelance, and make sure you have the Guts skill equipped. This coming battle will leave you shattered. To my side, my noble Einherjar. This game is a divine assault. I'm Richard for RPG Fortress, and this is... Jesus fucking Christ, Valkyrie Elysium is misstep after misstep, but it's almost really good. Too bad they fumbled so much of this title we almost had another classic entry in the Valkyrie Profile series, but instead we got something mostly forgettable and uninspired. I really need to start cutting down these titles a bit. Valkyrie Elysium was released in September 2022 for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and a short time later on PC. The game was published by Square Enix and it was developed by Soleil. Now, I had to look up this company because the first three games were produced by Tri-Ace. Soleil's short but interesting resume includes a Naruto game, a Samurai Jack game, Wanted Dead, and well, yeah, let's let this be the first red flag. I trawled the game's Mobi page looking for staff members of note, but this game has a lot of, "this is the first game I worked on" staff. Standouts are the game's character designer, Yuya Nagai, who has done some incredible work for some incredible titles. You can see some of their work on Nier Automata, Nier Reincarnation, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and the Black Eyed Peas experience for Xbox 360. What? We also have Motoi Sakuraba returning to provide the music. The man did the music for the first three games, and it's great to see at least some sort of connection between the old games and this game. And that's just about all that I could find for development of this game. This title was basically announced and then released a couple of months later. There was very little fanfare between the announcement and the release. Let's let that be red flag number 2. The story of Valkyrie Elysium follows Valkyrie, sometimes called Maria, as she is directed by Odin to purify souls. You know, just Valkyrie things. The premise is very similar to Valkyrie Profile. You're a Valkyrie, go do Valkyrie things. But other than this premise, there's not really a lot connecting the previous games. The story, world building, and characters are all pretty much brand new. Other than a couple of names, a couple of spells, a couple of phrases, this game is not connected to Valkyrie Profile in any conceivable way. There is no mention of previous games, no characters return. This Valkyrie and this Odin are not the Valkyrie and Odin from the VP games. This game could have been called Sword Lady or Valhalla Quest or Odin's Girl, and no one would have batted an eye. I think that this is absolutely mind-boggling. To bring back an adored series but not actually connect it to the games that came before it is just a truly brain-melting decision. As the game moves forward, Valkyrie will meet another Valkyrie named Hilde. There is an immediate hostility between the two, but it's completely unwarranted. The conversation basically turns into a childish back and forth. You're being controlled by Odin. No, Odin is a good guy. No, he's not. Yes, he is. And there is a parallel to the original VP. Odin ended up being a villain in that game. A villain controlling the Valkyrie for his own schemes, all the while putting up a front that he's a benevolent force working to better Midgard. But it doesn't play like an homage. It feels like the devs Googled what happened in Valkyrie Profile, took some brief notes, and then made a game out of it. Put a pin on that thought, because we're going to return to it shortly. Eventually, we do find out that Odin is, of course, a bad guy. He wants the souls and treasures that Valkyrie finds so that he can reset the universe. Hilde was initially one of Odin's Valkyries, but went rogue because Odin manipulated the death of her parents so she'd join him as a Valkyrie, or something along those lines. Also, the Valkyrie that you play was killed and stolen away from her lover to serve Odin. The story is unfortunately very fragmented. There's not a lot there, and it's all very seen it and done it before. The game's chapter system, which is actually just levels disguised as chapters, chops up the story into bite-sized pieces that are very forgettable. Eventually, you fight Odin, Valkyrie and Hilde team up, and that's pretty much it. The game has 4 endings, and they're all pretty boring regardless of which one you get. Any way you take it, the story is really nothing special, and it's just not told very well. The game does have some good world building though. As you play, you get to recruit 4 Einherjar to fight alongside you. These Einherjar are fallen soldiers, warriors who were valiant in life but received a bad end. And just like in Norse mythology, the Valkyrie is here to recruit them to fight for Odin. This is great. Valkyrie truly shines as a benevolent figure, and the 4 Einherjar are all very interesting. Your first Einherjar is the warrior Egon. He's a 2-handed sword user with a lightning elemental affinity. Your second Einherjar is the archer Cypher. He uses bows and has an ice elemental affinity. Your third Einherjar is Christopher. She's a knight who uses a lance and has a holy affinity. And your fourth and final Einherjar is Taika. She's a druidish kind of character who uses boatloads of fire attacks and looks a lot like Fauna from Hololive. These 4 are colorful and interesting, and their personal stories add a well-needed bit of electricity to a game with such a lifeless story. Their personalities and backstories bring a lot of life to the game, and they also bring a lot of life to combat, which is okay at first, but ultimately pretty underwhelming. So, the gameplay is where things open up a bit, and where I will say the game is pretty good. Now, some people say that the game is kinda like Devil May Cry, but But this isn't quite correct. Devil May Cry has buttery smooth, super stylish combos. Valkyrie Elysium is not that. It's a lot more stiff. It's not unplayable though, but the DMC comparisons aren't quite right. It plays more methodically, maybe like The Witcher 3 or Xenoblade maybe? Just let it be known that when you press the attack button, you are waiting for the attack to carry itself out. Combat isn't terrible, it's not great, but it's not bad. You run around, jumping, slashing, doing light combos, etc. The game features various spells, and you can set 4 of them at a time for easy access. You also have access to a host of items, which I will get back to shortly because I want to say some nice things first before getting back to all of the whinging. You will eventually have access to a number of slightly different weapons, a couple of swords, a couple of spears, and a staff. They're not incredibly different from each other, but they are different enough to have fun with. For example, you have a sword, a rapier, and a greatsword, and that's half of your arsenal. Lock in 2 spears and a staff that kind of plays like a spear, and the weapons are just not that creative, but they do spice up combat a little bit. They've got their own combos, so I guess that's something. During combat, you can also summon your Einherjar. Each of the 4 warriors has their own quick access just like your spells, so you can whip them out pretty quickly when needed. Spells and Einherjar have their own separate NP style bars, so you'll need to keep track of each to make sure that you don't run low during big fights. Between weapon combos, summoning your 4 Einherjar, and casting spells, you have a decent amount of actions that you can take in combat, keeping things fresh, at least for a little while. Eventually, the lack of things to do in and outside of combat does get pretty old. This is partially due to how many mandatory fights you're going to engage in. Battles in Valkyrie Elysium are very, very, very frequent. Combat seems evenly paced for the first little bit, but you will eventually get to the stage where you can see how easily telegraphed these battles are. Every stage, and yes, I will reiterate, the chapters are a lot more like levels or stages than chapters, is basically a combat room. A short hall leading to the next combat room, short hall leading to the next combat room, etc. ad nauseum. Making these combat encounters even more dire is that you don't gain levels, so every combat encounter is going to be something you need to put 100% focus into. You won't ever get strong enough to bulldoze weaklings. You do gain some skill points, which you can use to learn skills, so that's something. Some of these skills will give you stat boosts and some will give you combat skills. Nothing particularly exciting though. But yeah, with a lack of proper RPG leveling, you will never get to a stage where you can trounce enemies. And this would have made backtracking a lot more enjoyable because you are going to be doing a lot of backtracking. I have complained about optional quests before, and I'm gonna do it again. Valkyrie Elysium has a load of bad side quests for you to do, and they all equate to go back to a previous stage and reach a flag. These quests are explained like go find a thing or go fight a thing, but they all revolve around simply reaching a glowing spot on the map to continue. But traversing back to these spots involves loads and loads of combat encounters, so you are going to be fighting a lot on these quests. Furthermore, when you pick up a quest mid-level, and this part is truly bonkers, you need to finish the level, go to the map screen in Valhalla, choose the quest you want to do, and then you are warped back into the level to do that one quest. You're not picking up multiple quests and working on them during the stage. You are re-entering the stage after you finish it to do these quests one at a time. I want to say I can't fathom why this is done, but I know exactly why it's done. There is not a lot to this game, so it needs to reuse assets as much as it possibly can. You are going to be replaying the same 5 areas all game long. These areas actually look pretty decent until you see them for the 10th or the 11th time. Also, if you're into achievements, and I understand that not everyone is, you are going to need to replay this game several times. Most modern games will grant you the achievements for lesser difficulties if you play the higher difficulties. Play the hard mode, unlock the achievements for hard and for normal. It's a very regular thing these days, but if you want all of the achievements in Valkyrie Elysium, these achievements don't stack. You're going to be playing the same 5 areas in normal, then in hard, then in Valkyrie difficulty. And there is absolutely zero chance I am playing this game more than once. Something else that is very wrong with this game is, as I said earlier, it seems that the devs just Googled Valkyrie Profile and plucked up some ideas just out of the first few hits. The main story beat is copy-pasted from the original VP, but there are a few other things that are a little bit off. They brought back Lenneth's classic "To my side, my noble Einherjar" line, but the new Valkyrie doesn't actually say that. She says, "To my side, my noble Einherjar." Now, the original pronunciation was off as well. It's not Einherjar, it's Einherjar. So, if they were going to fix up the pronunciation of a mispronounced word, okay, that's cool. Pronounce it correctly. But they don't do that. They mispronounce it in a whole new way. Why? Also, they got Yuya Nagai to do the art of Valkyrie, just like the classic pose of Lenneth from VP1, and it looks really good, but it's just a weird callback in a game that has very few callbacks. Is this a continuation? Is this a brand new series? It feels like this game was shoved into an AI with the toggle switch to make a brand new Valkyrie Profile game, I guess. And Valkyrie Elysium is what we ended up with on the first pass. The game isn't super hard, but as I mentioned earlier, there's an issue with healing items. There is no item shop. You only get healing potions if you can find them. If you run out, you can get stuck if a boss or a group of enemies has you beat. You can always leave the stage and go on to an earlier stage to try to pick up some potions, but keep in mind that you can't just jump into a stage, grab some healing items, and jump out. If you leave the stage without finishing the stage, you lose your progress. So if you want to go back and get some healing items, you need to finish the entire stage. Holy shit. Now, the game has 2 bits of DLC, and I skipped them both. There's Hilde's Vengeance and the Seraphic Gate. Hilde's Vengeance is a kind of retelling of the story, but from Hilde's point of view, but you are playing the same exact stages that you just played, so no thanks. One playthrough was more than enough. The Seraphic Gate borrows its name from the classic Tri-Ace bonus dungeon from the VP titles, along with the Star Ocean titles, but this isn't actually the Seraphic Gate. This is just a bunch of back-to-back combat rooms. No thank you. At least the battlefield is something different to look at. Valkyrie Elysium tries something new with the series. If this came from genuine love, developer ineptitude, and indifference to the property, or a mandate from the bigwigs at Square Enix, I don't know. It seems like a little bit of all this mixed together. There are some interesting ideas and some genuinely fun moments, but it's just not enough. The seed of the story isn't particularly great, but it's familiar, and I think with enough nurturing, it could have been pretty fun. Yes, it's a retreading of the original Valkyrie Profile, but that's fine. Retreading happens in RPGs all the time. But what Valkyrie Elysium gives us is a fragment of a story that we've heard before, and then fails to build on it. Combat is fun, and swapping between Einherjar and spells gives you some good battle options, but the constant mandatory fights is just too much. There is just too much combat, and while the combat at first is pretty fun, it's also pretty unremarkable. And the more you play it, the less fun it becomes, and the more unremarkable it becomes. If the game was shorter with less fights, you could leave it at, okay, it's not great, but it's pretty fun. Instead, with so many fights layered upon so many fights, you're left with a game that is just too long, with too many battles, and the feeling that you're left with is, it's not very good, and the battles get old fast. Valkyrie Profile was a sleeper hit. It was a niche title during a huge RPG boom. It has an underground following now, but without the PS1 Final Fantasy VII-led RPG boom, we might not have ever gotten a game like it. Maybe it was a little bit too niche to bet on without that boom. You really don't see a lot of games that took inspiration from Valkyrie Profile these days. The only game that springs to mind is Indivisible, and that game had a combat system very similar to the original VP. There might be more VP DNA in that game than in Valkyrie Elysium. Part of me thinks that this game might have started as an unrelated title, something that Soleil was developing on their own, and then Square Enix swooped in and said, hey, why not Google Valkyrie Profile and use that as a springboard to make a middle-of-the-road action game? The game is just so repetitive that it feels incomplete. The content is stretched so thin it is absolutely unreal. I have to imagine and even hope that this is the sad reality, because this game is almost really good. It feels like a 9 or 10 hour game that has been stretched out to fill 50, 60, 70 hours. If it had a bit more attention paid to the story, more combat options, more areas, a proper leveling system, and just a little bit more time in the oven, it may have actually been cool, but it's just okay. I did have a bit of fun with Valkyrie Elysium, but it's not worthy to occupy the same oxygen with Valkyrie Profile. That's it, another game done and dusted. I was let down by this game, but I hope you enjoyed the video. 2024 is off with a bang, that bang being Valkyrie Elysium imploding during my 45th visit to Stage 2. Oh well. Oh, I forgot to follow up on something actually. The composer was Motoi Sakuraba, but I had no idea. The soundtrack is a lot different from his prog rock influenced shenanigans of other games, including the previous VP titles. But I did really enjoy it. It's majestic, soaring, and enchanting. It's very different from his normal style, but it's very good. Now, if you want to do something that's not quite majestic, soaring, or enchanting, you can do the YouTube stuff. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, check out our Patreon, check out our Discord, buy a shirt, buy an album, play Valkyrie Profile, read the Norse Eddas, listen to Secret of the Runes by Therion, use your spiritual concentration to find a better game, max your stats before going to Valhalla, and get ready for a good game next time. It's a game that glows in the dark. For RPG Fortress, my name is Richard. See you next time, and don't forget to hug a cat. Goodbye.